Hello, and welcome to another great episode of Royal Black and Elite. I'm Lady TrenettWilson, your lecturer and social historian. If you're new to the channel, welcome. And if you're a loyal royaler, hi everyone. I want to thank you everyone for your likes, your shares, and subscribe. And as we gear up for Black History Month, I'm getting ready to hit the road. And hitting the road is what today's lecture is all about. You know, there's nothing more than American than a road trip. And as the 20th century opened, lots of Black families were taking road trips from the South to the North and beyond. And it was during a time called something called the Great Migration. And it was due to the segregation and discrimination that was the law in the South. But not just really in the South. There was discrimination all the way up to the North. And in that discrimination, we see Black travelers who were families who were traveling on the road by car, often had to kind of know how to prevent themselves from getting into scrapes, situations, and interactions that could make their trip end negatively. Now, during that time, the families would pack their cars full of food, full of pop, full of snacks, so that they would not have to stop on the road. Why, you may ask? Well, again, because of the segregation. They couldn't use the bathrooms, they couldn't stop and get gas, they couldn't stay at hotels. So there was a lot of separatism. And within this separatism, Black people had to know where to go, what cities to avoid. They used to have cities called sundown towns. And you know, when I think about it, when we used to travel when we were small, my mom would pack the car with a lot of food and we wouldn't stop a lot. And I always thought it was just because she was trying to save money, but possibly it could be because of these reasons that I just mentioned. And then, of course, if you were small and your mother said, "Don't let the sundown catch you. Don't you better get here before that sun goes down or before those lights go off." And those are things that we tell each other based on the trauma that we faced in the past. So I thought that was interesting, just a little add into there if you're doing things. Knowing the root of where these things have come from is really important. So as these Black people were traveling and needed a place, they needed gas. Sometimes they needed to sleep. They needed to use the bathroom. Now, the need to know where to stop was crucial. I mean, can you imagine being a Black family not knowing where to stop while traveling on the road? And it was because of a gentleman named Victor Hugo Green that Blacks began to know where to stop as they traveled. You see, he came out with a book in 1936 called The Negro Motorist and later called The Negro Traveler's Green Book. Now, the Green Book, some people know about it, some people don't, but they don't know the history behind him. So I thought this would be a great lecture to have. Again, thank you for joining me, and let's get into his story. Now, Mr. Green was born in Manhattan, New York on November the 9th, 1892. He was the oldest of three, and his father was William H. Green, and his mother's name was Alice. Now, when he was 21, he became a postal worker. And if you know, you know. Back in the day, if you worked at the post office, that meant good pay and good benefits. So he worked there for 5 years before meeting and marrying who would be his future wife and really the engine behind the Green Book because she was the editor. So everything that came in, she laid it out, made sure it was spelled correctly, laid out correctly. So this shows how husband and wife can really work together when they're on the same accord. Now, her name was Alma Duke, and she was from Richmond, Virginia. And Miss Alma had been one of those people who moved during the Great Migration that I mentioned a little earlier when I was talking about African Americans moving from one side of the country to the next. Now, they were married on September the 8th, 1917, in Brooklyn, New York. And she would not only be his life partner, but his business partner. Now, after they were married, they moved to Harlem. Now, during this time, Harlem was experiencing what we call the Harlem Renaissance. And that was a great cultural awakening, musical awakening, and travelers would travel on something called the Chitlin Circuit. So a lot of the artists needed to know where to stop. If you've ever seen the movie Lady Sings the Blues, and you could see it here on YouTube for free, Diana Ross at her peak best. I mean, oh my goodness. Lady Sings the Blues, Mahogany. Smash that like if you know what I'm talking about. Those movies, they don't make movies like that anymore. Let's just start there. Richard Pryor, you know what? I'm going to do a review on that movie because that movie is breathtaking. And we need to remember where we came from and the real talent that we really had and the stories that were told. And some of those stories on the road we see in The Lady Sings the Blues is she saw some things while they were traveling. They couldn't go into a certain restaurant to eat. And so the truth of what they really faced really needs to be told. And Mr. Green lived it. He was in it. And as a postman, he was able to release the Green Book because he knew postmen all over the country. And so within that city, they would tell him, hey man, so and so, you can go eat here. You can use the bathroom over here. You can get your car fixed over here. So with that network of postal workers, he was able to release the Green Book. And the first one was published in 1936. He sold 15,000 of it, and by 1937, the very next year, they were 16 pages, and he sold them for 25 cents a piece. By 1957, they had increased to $1.25, and he was making pretty good money. I mean, it was a business that he was able to sustain selling this Green Book. So that's how he began. By the 1940s, the Green Book listed thousands of establishments because originally, when he first did it, it only covered New York and it talked about restaurants and hotels. But by the time, again, by the 1940s, it included the whole entire country because of that great network that he had built. In 1960, Alaska only had one entry in the Green Book. So it also saw the limitations throughout the country. So there were some places that didn't have anywhere that catered to Black people. So people actually opened their home. And here are some actual houses and places that were on the list for the Green Book. They had places like Ruth's Beauty Parlor. They even had a place in Austin, Texas. And this was a professor here in his home, and he and his wife would open up their home to weary travelers. So they used a combination of houses and actual businesses to meet the needs of the Black traveler. And a company came alongside Mr. Green and the Black community and made sure that as Blacks traveled down the road, they could get what was the most important thing to getting them down the road, which was a gas station. You see, during that time, Exxon Mobil, which was owned by the Standard Oil Company, so it was a different name back then, but they franchised their service stations to Black owners. They were financed through, again, Standard Oil, and so there were Black owned gas stations all in up the freeway because of the investment of Exxon Mobil. Now you can go through thousands of cities today and count on one hand at the number of Black-owned gas stations. So shout out to Exxon Mobil. I know they're a controversial company for some, but during this time period and during the time of the Green Book, they made Black business ownership possible. Now, the Greens were enterprising, let me say, because not only did they have that book, they also had a travel agency. It was called the Vacation Reservation Service. So they would book the people's trip, up the road. So they knew where the places were. So they just connected them and it made sense. So they also did that. By 1949, the Green Book had gone international. They had one in Bermuda and Mexico. He officially changed the name from the Negro Motorist to the Negro Traveler's Guide in 1952 because by then blacks were not only driving now, but we were also flying, going by train, boats. However you could get there, we were getting there. Now, since its first publication till its last, it never missed a year except during World War II. So Green had a vision. He and his wife worked together to bring it to passed, and because of that, many Black people could travel safely and knew where to stop. So we commend him for the job that he did. I wanted to bring his story to light because it's important. Mr. Green passed on October the 16th, 1960, in Manhattan, New York. He was 67 years old when he passed. He and his wife didn't have any children, but after his death, Alma actually continued the Green Book until 1967. And really, after the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which made discrimination, well, not discrimination, but segregation at least, illegal, there was no need now to have the Green Book anymore. So they gave much of their life to the service of making sure Black travelers travel safely. And if you want to see a collection of the Green Book, there is the largest one in New York at the Schomburg Center. So and it's a public library. So definitely go in there and check it out inside the library. They have a little area set aside. And here are some pictures of those, of the center and everything that's set up. What an amazing story and really an amazing marriage. Miss Alma passed in 1978. And here are some more pictures of the places that were on the route in the Green Book. And the Lorraine Hotel is where Martin Luther King was passed away. So here's the link down to his video. And we want to get those numbers up. Make sure you like. You all, when you like, it really helps us because it drives the video through the algorithm. So I appreciate you liking it, especially likes it when you comment, and I especially like when you comment. So I hope that you really enjoyed today's lesson. I learned a lot. I hope that you learned a lot about travel, about the sacrifices and fear that we had to face when we used to travel. And so our hats off to Miss Alma and Mr. Victor H. Green for the work that they have done. I want to thank you for joining me. And as always, my lectures are for entertainment and educational purposes only. And my resources were New York Times, blackpass.com, and the Green Book Chronicles. And I'll see you on another great episode of Royal Black and Elite. Oh, and I want to shout out Billy D also. You know, Billy D was tough on Lady Sang the Blues too. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you on our next episode.